"This is a mistake," he said, without emotion. "No," she whispered, trembling. "This is a miracle. You just don't see it yet." Natalie Reyes never believed in miracles. Not since the accident that stole her parents and left her raising her little sister, Mia, on her own. But the two pink lines staring up from the pregnancy test in her hand, that felt like one, or maybe a storm, waiting to destroy everything. She sat on the edge of her apartment bathtub, knees drawn to her chest, barely breathing. The bathroom light flickered overhead, the only witness to her unraveling world. How was she supposed to tell him? How do you tell a man who's built walls of steel around his heart walls, tall enough to crush anything soft or vulnerable, that you're carrying his child? Not just any man, Liam Ashford, the cold, brilliant, untouchable billionaire CEO of Ashford International, her boss, her client, her one-night mistake. They had met 6 months ago when she was hired as the PR strategist for one of his controversial tech projects. He wasn't supposed to notice her. She was just another cog in the machine. But then came the power outage at the gala, the champagne, the rooftop, the momentary flicker of humanity in his otherwise robotic eyes, and then, one night, one single night that shattered everything she thought she knew about control. And now she was pregnant, with his child. The irony was cruel. Liam Ashford didn't just dislike children, he despised them. He'd made it clear in every interview, every business policy. No maternity leave extensions. No bring your kids to work nonsense. No exceptions. Children, he once said, weaken ambition. Natalie pressed a hand to her stomach, her child, her little heartbeat. She didn't regret the life growing inside her, but she feared what it would cost her, and she feared what he would say when she told him. Liam was exactly where he always was. At 8 a.m., standing at the window of his private office on the 59th floor, looking down on the city he owned. His posture was perfect. His suit, navy, and tailored to precision. His eyes unreadable. "Natalie," he said without turning. "You're early. I needed to talk to you." He finally faced her. "Is this about the media backlash on the Terrantech merger, or the misinformation campaign from Maxwell Corp?" "No," she said quietly. "It's personal." He frowned. "I'm pregnant." The words hovered in the air like glass fragile, ready to shatter. "And it's yours." He blinked. "Once. That's not possible. We used protection, but nothing." Is 100% silence. Natalie's voice shook. "I don't want anything from you, Liam. I just thought you deserved to know." He stepped back, eyes narrowing as if she were a complex algorithm he needed to solve. "Why now? Why tell me this at all?" "Because I know what kind of man you are," she said softly. "Calculated, responsible, cold, yes, but not cruel. I thought you'd want the truth." He turned away, staring back out at the skyline. When he finally spoke, his voice was even emotionless. "I will arrange financial support, a private residence, medical staff, full discretion, everything you need, but do not expect affection or involvement." Her heart cracked. "You don't want to be part of your child's life?" she asked. "I don't do children," he said. "I don't know how, and I'm not going to pretend." "Then learn," she whispered. He glanced at her. "The most brilliant man I've ever met. You can build satellites and empires, but you can't hold a baby. Come on, Liam, you're not broken, just scared." He didn't respond, just turned back to his desk, as if dismissing the conversation and her with one silent motion. She stood there a moment longer, then reached into her purse and placed a single ultrasound photo on his desk. "Whether you want to or not, you're going to be a father. What kind you become, that's still up to you." Then she walked out, not looking back. Natalie was curled up on her sofa, her sister Mia asleep beside her, when her phone buzzed. A calendar invite from Liam Ashford. Title: Discussion of Future Arrangements. Time: 7:30 p.m. Location: Ashford Residence. Private entrance sheet. Stared at the screen for a full minute before accepting. The Ashford penthouse was sleek, cold, and stunning, just like its owner. He led her into a private room. No lawyers, no assistants, just him, a tablet, and what looked like digital files and schedules. "I don't want to fight," he said before she could speak. "I've made a proposal." She hesitated, then sat across from him. On the tablet was a detailed plan: care, housing, insurance, trusts, schedules, even private education options projected 10 years ahead. It was flawless and terrifying. "You've planned for everything," she said. except being a father. He admitted quietly. Her heart skipped. I was raised by nannies, tutors, staff. My father was distant, cold. When my mother left, he blamed me for everything. I learned early that love is a liability. Natalie softened. But what if it isn't? He looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time, she saw something vulnerable in his eyes. I want to try, he said. Not for me, for the child. But I'll need guidance, rules, a structure. She smiled through tears. You're asking for a parenting strategy. I work better with systems. Then we'll build one, together. Asterisk. As Liam walked her to the elevator, he paused. Natalie, he said. She turned. I don't know how to love, but I'm willing to learn. The elevator doors closed, and Natalie exhaled. For the first time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, this child wouldn't grow up fatherless. But she also knew this was only the beginning. Asterisk. The parenting class was held in a sunlit building with cartoon clouds painted on the walls and tiny plastic chairs lining the entrance. Liam Ashford stepped inside like a man walking into enemy territory. He didn't flinch at billion-dollar contracts or hostile boardrooms, but the sight of toddlers with snack-covered faces made his jaw tighten. Natalie had arrived before him, sitting near the back of the room, her hands gently resting on her belly. Her face lit up the moment she saw him walk in. It wasn't a smile of affection, it was disbelief, as if she hadn't really expected him to come. But he had, because last night, after she'd left his penthouse, he'd sat in silence, staring at the ultrasound photo she had left behind. Something about the grainy black and white image had pierced a place inside him he didn't know existed. For hours, he'd heard the ticking of his expensive watch echoing through his otherwise perfect apartment. He was used to solving problems, but this wasn't a problem. It was a person, a little person. His Denise, the parenting instructor, clapped her hands. She had a warm face and an energy that could tame hurricanes. Welcome, everyone. Today we'll be covering bonding, emotional readiness, and a hands-on baby care demonstration. Liam's face remained unreadable. He sat beside Natalie stiffly, scanning the colorful walls like they were part of an alien landscape. Denise handed each pair a baby doll. Let's start with a basic diaper change. Don't worry, no one's expected to be perfect. Liam studied the plastic baby in his hands like it might explode. Natalie stifled a laugh. Relax, she whispered. It doesn't bite. I ordered an AI parenting assistant last night, he said quietly. It arrives Friday. She blinked. You're serious, of course. Denise leaned over and smiled at him. Mr. Ashford, right? We're so glad you're here. Why don't you give it a try? I assume there are steps, he replied, already laying out the wipes and diaper, in precise alignment on a sterile cloth he had brought from home. Efficiency is key. Natalie raised an eyebrow. It's a baby, not a science project. 3 minutes later, he had changed the doll's diaper and recorded the time on his smartphone. Then he gently turned the doll toward Denise, as if presenting a completed task. Technically accurate, she nodded, but maybe try adding some affection next time. Babies don't care how fast you are, they care how safe they feel. Liam hesitated. Safe. The word lingered. It was foreign to him, distant. He didn't know how to make a child feel safe. He wasn't even sure he'd ever felt that way himself. Natalie watched him, something soft rising in her chest. He was trying, not perfectly, not naturally, but earnestly, and that mattered. The class moved on to discussion. Partners were asked to share their fears about parenthood. When it was Liam's turn, the room fell quiet. He cleared his throat, uncomfortable. I've never been around children. I don't know what they need. I was raised to value success, not softness. He paused, glancing at Natalie. I'm afraid I won't be enough, that I'll repeat what was done to me, that I'll disappear, not physically, but emotionally. The words shocked even him. Natalie reached for his hand, not to comfort him, but to anchor him. You're here, she said. That's more than most ever do. After class, they walked together to the parking lot. The city skyline shimmered. Behind them, golden and alive. You really didn't have to come, she said. I did, he replied. I gave you my word. For weeks. 1 month of effort, a measurable timeline. Natalie laughed softly. You really can't help but treat life like a contract, can you? It's the only way I know how. She turned to face him. Then maybe it's time to learn a new way. He stared at her for a long moment, not at her face, but at the place where her hands met her belly. His child, his future, his second chance. He spoke quietly. I bought a book. A parenting book. He nodded. 2, actually. 1 psychological, 1 practical. Let me guess, she teased. You already made a spreadsheet. He didn't deny it. She shook her head, smiling. Liam, this isn't just about data. It's about showing up, even when it's messy, especially then. That night, Liam returned to his penthouse, alone, but for the first time, he didn't feel like the silence was peaceful. It felt ... empty. He walked into the guest room he'd recently converted into a nursery. The crib was still in its box. The walls were bare. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ultrasound photo again. He didn't know how to love, but maybe love didn't care about knowing. Maybe it just needed a place to start. He placed the photo on the nightstand beside the crib and left the light on. Tomorrow. He'd try again, and the next day, and the day after that, because maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the story of a man who hated children. Maybe it was the story of a man learning how not to be afraid of loving them, and that story was only just beginning. The rain was coming down in sheets, soaking the pavement outside Ashford Tower as Natalie stood beneath the canopy, her coat wrapped tightly around her growing belly. Her ride hadn't arrived yet, and every passing car splashed cold water at her ankles. She was shivering, but it wasn't just from the rain. Inside the glass tower behind her, the man who had once said he would never become a father was upstairs, poring over parenting manuals like they were merger contracts. It had been 3 weeks since that first parenting class, and Liam hadn't missed a single one. He'd shown up early, taken notes, and even asked awkward but sincere questions. He was still calculating, still too formal, still stiff, but she could feel the shift. Something was cracking beneath the surface. Her phone buzzed. Liam, I'm downstairs. Don't move. Before she could reply, his sleek black car pulled to the curb, and he stepped out without an umbrella. In seconds, he was at her side, holding his coat above her head as he ushered her into the passenger seat. You'll get soaked, she said, surprised. He shrugged, climbing in beside her, his hair already dripping. Then I'll dry off. The car was warm, quiet. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rain pelted the windows like static, but inside, the silence was different this time, less empty, more familiar. I saw you standing there, he said finally, shivering. Alone. She glanced at him. I'm used to being alone. I don't want you to be. Her breath caught. He kept his eyes on the road as he drove. The more time I spend preparing for this child, the more I realize I've been preparing for nothing my whole life. I've been investing in silence, in control, but this. He glanced at her belly, his voice low. This is the first thing that scares me and matters to me. She didn't know what to say, but something in her chest loosened. Later that evening, they sat at a small table in his penthouse, eating the simple meal she had cooked while he watched her, fascinated, as if trying to understand something alien. I've never eaten homemade soup before, he said. Never. She laughed. Not even as a kid. I don't remember my mother cooking, he said, and the staff weren't allowed to. She placed her spoon down gently. No wonder your world's always been so clinical. I'm trying to change that, he said, almost shyly. She smiled. Start with this. Try holding the baby. Tonight, he froze. The doll. No, she said, teasing. A real one. Her sister Mia had brought over her 3-month-old son Luca earlier that day. He was asleep in the guest room, wrapped in soft blankets. Liam looked like she'd just asked him to carry a grenade. You want me to pick him up? You said you want to learn. He stood slowly, adjusting his sleeves like he was preparing for open-heart surgery, and followed her into the room. Luca stirred softly in the crib, his tiny fists curled against his chest. Natalie reached down, gently lifting the baby and turning to Liam. Here, his hands shook slightly as he reached for the child. She guided him through its support, the head, cradle the back, relax your shoulders, and then he was holding him, a living, breathing human being. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there with a baby in his arms, the rain still tapping against the windows. After a few moments, Luca opened his eyes and smiled. It was small, barely more than a twitch of the lips, but it was real, and Liam gasped, as if the weight in his arms had suddenly become something else, entirely something light, something good. I didn't expect that, he whispered. Natalie watched him, her heart full. Neither did I. The stood in silence for a while, him rocking slightly, her watching the impossible unfold. Eventually, Liam spoke. I've spent my whole life avoiding this feeling. What feeling? Warmth, he said quietly. Trust. Connection. He turned to her, still holding Luca, something almost like awe in his eyes. If I can feel this for someone else's child, maybe I'm not incapable after all. You never were, she said. You were just never given the chance. As they walked back into the living room, the city spread out beneath them. Natalie suddenly realized something she hadn't dared to hope for before. This wasn't just about preparing Liam to be a father. It was about watching him become one. And somehow, against every odd, it was working. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more uncertainty. But tonight she had hope. And for the first time, so did he. ChatGPT said. The last thing Liam expected to feel when he walked into that hospital room was fear, not the kind that made him tremble, but the kind that crept up slowly and took hold of his breath. Natalie was sitting on the exam table, a nurse checking her vitals. He'd missed her call earlier. She hadn't sounded panicked in the voicemail, but the words "I think you should be here" were enough to make him drop everything. His company had survived economic crashes and global scandals under his leadership. But standing in that room, watching a monitor beep next to the woman carrying his child, made everything else in his life feel laughably small. Natalie looked up when he entered, her face pale but calm. "Hey, you didn't have to come so fast. I was already halfway here," he lied. The nurse smiled at him and stepped out. Liam walked closer, noticing the way Natalie's hand rested protectively over her stomach. "They said everything's okay," she assured him. "Just a little dehydration. Baby's fine." He exhaled quietly, not realizing until then how tightly he'd been holding tension in his chest. "You should be resting more," he said. "I have a job, and bills, and a little person doing gymnastics inside me. You don't have to keep doing this alone," he said. "I mean it." Her eyes searched his. "Are you offering help or partnership?" He didn't blink. "Whatever. You'll let me give." There was a long silence before she nodded, just once. It wasn't agreement, not yet. But it was a step. When the nurse returned, she began to do the ultrasound. The room filled with a soft, rhythmic sound, teeny, rapid, and steady. "That's the heartbeat," the nurse said, smiling, "strong and healthy." Liam stared at the monitor. The image wasn't clear to him, just shapes and shadows. But the sound, that sound pierced right through him. It wasn't data. It wasn't numbers or projections or risk reports. It was life. Natalie turned her head to watch him. He was frozen, his eyes locked on the screen, his lips slightly parted, like he was witnessing something impossible. And maybe he was. Later, as they stepped out into the cool evening, Liam walked her to her car without a word. She turned to him, leaning lightly against the door. "You can say it, you know." "Say what?" "That you're scared." He looked away. "Don't see the value in admitting weakness." She tilted her head. "It's not weakness, it's awareness, and it makes you stronger." He didn't respond. Instead, he took something out of his coat pocket and held it out to her. It was a small, white book, leather-bound, blank pages. "What's this?" she asked. "I want to write to them," he said quietly, "even if I don't have the words yet. I figured if I start now, maybe by the time they're old enough to read it, I'll have become the man they deserve." Natalie was silent for a moment, then whispered, "That's the most real thing you've ever said to me." "It's the first thing I didn't rehearse," he admitted. She smiled and opened her car door, pausing to look at him once more. "You're getting there, Liam." He stood alone in the parking lot after she drove away, the sound of the heartbeat still playing over in his head like a memory on repeat. He didn't understand how something so small could change the entire trajectory of his life, but it had, and he wasn't going back. That night, Liam sat at his desk in the quiet of his penthouse. The city blinked in distant lights beyond the glass windows, but his eyes were on the blank page in front of him. He picked up the pen and began to write. "To the child I never expected, but already want to protect... Each word felt clumsy, but each one was honest. He was a man who had once prided himself on keeping the world at arm's length. But now, he was writing to someone who wasn't even born yet. And for the first time, Liam Ashford wasn't building an empire. He was building a future. The morning Natalie went into labor, nothing was ready. Not the hospital bag, not the crib, not her heart. She had spent months preparing for this moment, reading, stretching, counting baby kicks like clockwork, but when the first contraction hit, it tore through her like thunder. All the strength she'd held onto these past 9 months, scattered like glass. Mia wasn't answering her phone. The street outside her apartment was flooded from a freak spring storm. And Liam hadn't texted in 2 days. It wasn't anger that gripped her as she clutched the edge of the kitchen counter. Breath shaky, it was fear. Fear that she had let herself hope too much. Fear that maybe this entire transformation she'd witnessed in him had only been a passing interest. A project. Another calculation. She didn't even call him. She called a cab. It took 47 minutes to arrive. By then, the pain was sharp, pulsing, like her body was counting down to something irreversible. She tried to stay calm as she was wheeled into the maternity ward, nodding through questions, signing papers, with shaking hands, gripping the cold rail of the hospital bed as if it could keep her grounded. She was alone until the elevator dinged. The doors opened, and there he was, soaked from the storm, chest rising fast, his tie half removed, breathless. His eyes scanned the nurses until they landed on her, and when they did, he didn't blink. He ran, not walked, not strolled in, cool and controlled like usual. He ran. Natalie, he breathed, stepping into the room. Why didn't you call me? Because I didn't know if you'd come, she whispered, tears suddenly blurring everything. I promised you, he said, walking to her side, taking her hand without hesitation. I'm here. I was always going to be here. Her chest cracked, not from pain, but from something even more overwhelming. Relief. The nurse motioned toward a gown. Dad, are you staying for the birth? Natalie looked up at him slowly, unsure. Liam didn't wait. Yes, he said. Absolutely yes. Everything after that moved in flashes. Sweat, breathing, instructions, screams that didn't feel like hers. Time blurred, and through it all he never let go of her hand. He whispered to her, not like a man who was unsure, but like a man who was trying to give her his strength when hers was fading. You've got this, he said. You're the strongest person I've ever known. You're doing it, Natalie. When the cry filled the room, sharp and new and startling, Natalie didn't even realize she was sobbing until he wiped her face. The nurse held up the baby. It's a girl. For a moment, the world fell completely silent. Liam stepped forward, hands shaking slightly. He took the tiny bundle offered to him, and just like that, something in his face changed. This wasn't the same man who once said he didn't believe in holding babies. This wasn't the man who planned his life down to the second. This was someone new. He looked down at his daughter, his thumb brushing over her impossibly small fingers, and his mouth moved, but no sound came out. Only his eyes spoke. Wonder, fear, awe, love. Natalie watched him cradle their daughter with a gentleness she didn't know he had. He turned to her, and when he spoke, his voice was cracked, low, unlike anything she'd ever heard from him. She's perfect. She has your eyes, Natalie said, weakly smiling. And your heart, he whispered, sitting beside her. I want to name her something strong, something bright. She looked at him, surprised. You already thought of names? He nodded. One, just one, from the beginning. He took her hand, placed it gently over their daughter's chest. Clara, it means light. Tears spilled freely now. She couldn't stop them. Not from pain, from fullness. In that quiet hospital room, something happened that no blueprint, no algorithm, no business model could ever predict. A man became a father, not just by biology, by presence, by softness, by choice. Later that night, when the lights dimmed and the chaos settled, Liam sat in the chair beside Natalie's bed, holding Clara as she slept. Natalie stirred. You should rest. I can't, he said softly. Not tonight. She smiled, drifting again. Why? Because I never want to forget this, he whispered. She didn't hear him, but the baby did. Her tiny fingers curled round one of his and for the first time in Liam Ashford's life, he didn't feel alone. Liam Ashford never imagined a life where his calendar no longer ruled him. But now, 2 months after Clara's birth, the most important meetings in his life happened. At 3 a.m. with a bottle in one hand and a lullaby humming from his lips. Tonight was one of those nights. Clara was restless, her cries soft but insistent, her little body squirming in his arms. As he paced the nursery, he had memorized every corner of this room, not just because he designed it, because he lived in it now. Every book on fatherhood, he'd ever studied hadn't prepared him for this, the way her tiny hand curled into the fabric of his shirt as she drifted to sleep, the way her breath calmed the moment his voice filled the silence. He could quote investment stats in 5 languages, but here, words didn't matter. What mattered was presence, warmth, being there, and he was. Every night, every moment. Downstairs, Natalie was finally asleep. She'd fought exhaustion for hours trying to manage Clara's needs, refusing to ask for help until her eyes couldn't stay open. Liam had insisted she rest. He'd learned how to swaddle, burp, rock, and soothe, not because it came naturally to him, but because she mattered. Because they mattered. Clara whimpered again, and Liam gently bounced her, whispering to her like she could understand. I used to think people like me weren't meant for this. That fatherhood was something other men could do. Men who came from warmth, who knew how to give what they'd received. He swallowed, voice tightening. I didn't have that. I had silence, expectations, performance, and I was good at those things. I built a life on them. He paused, staring down at her sleepy face. But then you came, and suddenly, none of those things mattered. The mobile above the crib spun slowly, stars and clouds, and a quiet melody playing softly. He walked to the window, looking out over the city. The same skyline that once made him feel powerful now seemed smaller than ever. I used to think love was dangerous, that it made people reckless, weak. He sighed. But I was wrong. Love doesn't make you weak, it breaks you open, so something better can grow. Behind him, the door creaked open. Natalie stood there, her eyes still heavy with sleep, watching him. You always talk to her when you think no one's listening, she said softly. He turned, slightly embarrassed, but she smiled. Don't stop, she'll remember that, even if she doesn't know it yet. He walked over and placed Clara gently in her arms. She's your mirror, he said. She gets all her calm from you, and her fire from you, Natalie whispered. They stood there in the nursery, the 3 of them, surrounded by soft light and softer breaths. I had a dream once, Natalie said quietly. Before everything, I was standing in a home that didn't feel temporary, a place where no one walked away, where someone stayed, and we weren't perfect, but we were trying. Liam's hand found hers. Let's build that, he said. Not as a transaction, not as an arrangement, but for real. She looked at him, not as the man who signed her paychecks, not the billionaire, or the cold strategist who once flinched at the word family. She looked at the man who had been holding their daughter through every night, and she nodded. Days turned 2 weeks. Clara grew fast, her first smile, her first laugh, her first hiccups, all recorded in a journal Liam updated religiously. Every milestone, every new expression, every emotion Natalie caught in real time, he captured in words. By the time Clara turned 3 months, the journal had become something else entirely. It was no longer a tool for tracking progress. It was love, poured into pages. One evening, Natalie found it left open on the nightstand. She hadn't meant to read it, but her eyes caught the final entry, dated that morning. To my daughter, before you were born, I only understood success as power, money, and control. But now I see success as this, holding you close and knowing you feel safe, watching your mother sleep after another long night, and knowing I've finally learned what it means to show up, to stay. You didn't just make me a father, you made me whole. Natalie pressed her hand to her mouth, overcome, and that night, when Liam walked in and saw her crying quietly by the crib, he didn't ask what was wrong. He walked to her, pulled her close, and whispered, "This is the life I never knew I wanted, and I wouldn't trade it for anything I had before." She leaned into him, her voice full and steady. "Then let's never go back." They stood there until Clara stirred, opening her eyes to a world where love wasn't perfect, but it was. Constanta. World where a man who once hated children now woke every morning with the joy of being someone's father. A man who thought love was weakness now carried it with quiet strength, because sometimes the most broken hearts can become the best homes, and sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with fireworks. They begin with a heartbeat, a cry, a chance, and the choice to stay, always.